welcome everyone. Okay, so a lot of people, some familiar faces. Great to see. Okay, right. So we'll probably wait for a minute or two before we dive into it. While we wait, I'm going to Ben. Which part of the England are you based in?
So I live in a town called Haywards Heath, which very close to Gatwick Airport, kind of between Brighton and London. In the
Oh
UK.
no, that's perfect. Yeah, that's nice. Yeah, no, I'm going to be there in the first and second week of October. Yeah, and mostly in London, and
Mhm.
yeah, I'm already dreading the weather I'm going to encounter over there. But there is no escaping London weather, is there?
I'm afraid not. No. It's we're in a real change of seasons at the moment as well. We've had a reasonable summer, lots of sun this summer, but yeah, we're really feeling that change of seasons at the moment. Lots of thunderstorms in the last week or so. So yeah, I'll keep my fingers crossed for the weather that you get.
Well, I don't really have my hopes up, but we'll see what we get. Okay, so we already have 60 people, so I think that's as good as time as any to get started. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us on this live session. We have Ben Browning with us. Quick intro of Ben. Ben came up in a very hardcore agency environment where he did a lot of dialing, calling, selling, and from there he went in-house with Ernst& Young, one of the largest consulting firms in the world. There he got to see the strategic mistakes that recruiting businesses make when they pitch and acquire great clients like EY, right? So he saw those mistakes, decided to do something about it, joined Venn Group, which is one of the large search businesses based in UK, joined Venn Group as their leader in learning and development. And after that, he started his own practice that helps recruiting businesses strategically move from 1 to 10, right? So in tech parlance, we say 0 to 1 and 1 to 10. So you have your basics in place. You have some revenue. You have a couple of great clients, but now how do you scale? From let's say sub 500,000, maybe sub 1 million in revenue to 5 million, 10 million. What is that strategic framework that you can use, right? So that's what Ben does. Ben, thank you so much for giving us your time and being here on this call today.
Absolute pleasure, Manan, and thanks for inviting me on. And yeah, great to be here to get into it with everybody. Yeah, looking forward to sharing.
Perfect. So let's dive right in, right? So almost pretty much any niche that you pick, right, is going to be a crowded niche, right? Like there's going to be a lot of competition, especially when you are when you have just once you are done with your 0 to 1 journey, right?
Mm-hmm.
How can you differentiate yourself in a very, very crowded market? That's one of the a question that I get asked very, very often.
Yeah, absolutely. Most recruiters will be exactly in that situation where they need to win business away from their competition, whatever niche you're in. And one of the most straightforward ways of doing that, and the most scalable and sustainable ways of doing that, is by creating a approach to selling that really aligns what you're doing with solutions that you offer. And that kind of solution selling framework is very well tried and tested outside of the recruitment industry, but not as often used in the recruitment space. And that's exactly one of the things that I focus on, is how do you differentiate by aligning yourself with the solutions that your clients need, rather than simply thinking about the vacancy, the candidates, or the jobs you fill as being your primary kind of value to the client.
Okay, let's can you give an example, right? Like so let's say I'm a hiring manager, I'm a director of product management at a B2B SaaS company like Recruiter Flow, let's just say, right? Like, and I'm looking for a product manager. What do solutions look like for me?
Yeah, great. So the first thing I need to know is that as a product manager, what is your number one commercial goal over the next 12 to 18 months? What's on your radar? Is it releasing a new product? Is it being able to fix bugs, manage the product, and be able to develop things so that your UX is better? What's the kind of the commercial goal that you're most concerned about right now?
Well, I would say a little bit of all, but if I had to pick one, just be and stay number one at our UX.
Sure. Okay. So the next question I'm going to ask you is around how important you think having the right team around you is to making sure that you maintain that goal. So where would you rate the importance of having the right team around you in achieving that goal, Manan?
Right now, I would say 5 on 5. But I guess for anybody who's in leadership, it would either be 4 or 5.
Sure.
Right.
I typically find the same, right? I speak to business leaders in this space all the time, and we typically find the same. But the real question and the real challenge and the real thing that we need to look at next is how well do you feel that your approach and your strategy around hiring ensures that you're able to build and rebuild teams that keep you in that number one spot when it comes to UX?
Oh, wow, that's a fantastic question. Okay. First, we need to have a very clear goal and hiring framework, right? Like, okay, who the right persona looks like when we are hiring that next PM. What should they have achieved already? What do we expect them to achieve in, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, 12 months period? How do we make sure that we give ourselves the best chance of picking that right person? And not just hire the person that interviews the best, hire the person who can deliver the best, right? Like, so these and of course, right, like having access to the talent who, if they've been there, done that for a company in a similar industry or in a similar stage, that is just the cherry on top.
Yeah, 100%. And look, most of the businesses that we speak to, most of the product managers that we speak to will say a very similar thing, right? Most of the heads of product we speak to will say a very similar thing. They find 3 bottlenecks when it comes to optimizing their hiring. The first bottleneck that they find is the way they define their roles and what they specifically need, the skill set they specifically need in their business is changing, and it's changing very rapidly, particularly when we look at tech and AI and just the culture of work. Secondly, they need to be really able to understand the bottleneck or navigate the bottleneck of attracting talent. How do they turn that opportunity and make it really attractive to the workforce today? And the third challenge that they find, or the third bottleneck that they need to address, is how do they then effectively assess talent, especially given remote setting for a lot of hiring, to get to the forefront of that. And what we find is that when businesses master those 3 challenges, they end up in a position where hiring has gone from being a drag to being a competitive advantage. Right. If I was able to help you go on a journey from hiring being a drag to becoming a competitive advantage for your organization, is it something you'd be open to hearing more about? And that, in a nutshell, is how we go about it. So we've taken recruitment from being about filling vacancies to being about transforming the way an organization hires. And that's crucial because change for an organization, change for a business, change for an individual is really hard, right? As an individual, we want what's best for us. We also want what's easiest for us. And typically those 2 things are in conflict. You can't have what's best for you and what's easiest for you in most cases. At the same time, in a business, we want what is cheapest and most cost effective, but we also want what's going to generate the best profit for us. And those 2 things are in conflict. So when you go out there as a salesperson and you want an organization to change their provider or change the way they think about hiring, you've got all these 4 conflicting factors that make change a hard thing to pursue. And so unless you are able to attach the value of that change to what that individual and what that organization are trying to achieve, unless you're unable to attach that to their biggest commercial objective, it's going to be very difficult to create that real momentum for change.
You are right. And I want to kind of give a little bit of context to what Ben has just said, right? Like, and this is the solution selling. Um, so this is something it's been long used in software and SaaS industry, right? So you have transactional selling, you're selling something very cheap. So, you just want, very fast turnaround, right? So that is transactional selling. Uh, Works well for, products that are not critical, products that are, generally not a big dent in your budget, right? So that is number one. Then there is solution selling, then there is value selling, and then there is the challenge selling, right? So that's typically reserved for a new category of software. Where you are challenging the status quo. So again, right, like something very, very different. But these are typically the four major frameworks that most uh, salespeople, account executives at software companies will use, right? So, and a lot of selling of services is transactional rather than more solution or even value based approach, right? So, and that is what Ben is talking about. If you want to do more research, just you can just do solution based selling or value based selling, and you will find plenty of content on Google. But in the context of our industry, right? Like recruiting, executive search. How do you position yourself, right? Like as a strategic partner rather than just another vendor.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think the first thing that we've illustrated is that you can focus on filling vacancies, or you can focus on transforming the way your clients hire. The moment you start entering a conversation where you're talking about a strategic goal rather than a tactical one, so where you're looking at changing the way they experience hiring over a 6 to 12 month period as opposed to filling a vacancy today, that shift helps. But the second thing that really drives this, and what my clients tend to find really helps motivate them to that shift, is when you solution sell, the outcomes that you get are much more valuable. It's a much easier way of approaching selling retained. It's a much easier way of selling statement of work. It's a much easier way of selling ultimately the partnerships or the relationships that you want with the clients you're trying to win. As a result, you get bigger fees, higher fill rate, and more opportunities. So what that means in turn is that you can be more specific about the types of clients you go after. You need fewer clients to generate the same level of revenue. It's a much more efficient model for driving profit. So I think that as well as attaching your value to the strategic change, you also want to be thinking about, actually, we can reduce the number of clients we need, make more money, increase the client value. Again, a metric used widely in SaaS, but not so widely in recruitment. We can increase our client value with a more strategic approach to selling, and I think that goes some way to answering that question.
Yeah, I will back this up with a little bit an interesting bit of data of what we see internally of for Recruiter Flow users. So the businesses, so we work with a lot of recruiting businesses, right? So we get to see a lot of data that they are generating. So I can be wrong on numbers over here, but the businesses that are able to retain, so people who, top 20 percentile of people, those who, retain their customers, they grow almost 40% faster than the next 30 percentile, right? So, and very interestingly, a business generating, let's say, $1 million in revenue versus $5 million in revenue. The $5 million business does not have 5x more customers or even 5x more job orders, right? Like, I'm talking similar industries, similar, everything is same, right? Like a similar kind of target market, all of that. The 5 million business has about 3.5x more customers. They're just able to get more revenue out of the same set of logos that they already have, right? So
That
as you
is,
scale,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that
So
that is also another facet of solution selling, is that it also leads to much greater upselling and cross-selling opportunities. If you think about it, if your goal is to help an organization transform the way they hire, then that the journey is a longer journey. Like there is a journey to that. It's not just a destination. What you're selling is a process and a transformation, and there are ways to accelerate that journey. So there are products which will be, you can add more services or more support in to make those improvements happen quicker, or you can dial them back and they will happen more slowly. But that solution selling approach gives you a really good framework for upselling and cross-selling into your clients as well. So there's a real sort of sort of account expansion and ABM type play off the back of having these kinds of playbooks in your organization.
you're talking a lot of SaaS and software language. I love that, Ben. Um, so okay, so it's as an operator or as a founder, right? Like, how do I prepare myself for that mind shift, for that change in the way that I look at our own services, or the language that I use, right? Like, how do I get started on that process?
There's one question that will help recruitment business owners do this, and that question is: if in 18 months' time you've been working with a client for an 18-month period, and they come to you and they say, "Thank you so much. You've really changed the way that we operate when it comes to hiring." What kinds of changes would they be talking about? What kinds of changes would you have helped them make? What kinds of things would working with you have taught them and informed them about in terms of hiring? And you might be able to look at a snapshot of your existing clients and think, look, with those businesses you've been working with for some time, how has the way they hire changed? How has their behavior changed? How has their belief system around talent and recruitment changed? When you can answer that question, you get a lot closer to understanding what the solution that you're selling in solution selling really is and looks and feels like.
No, that's perfect. And I think one of the great ways that we did this at Recruiter Flow is we went back to our customers. A lot of them are here on this call as well, right? Like, we asked them, why did you pick us in the first place, right? Like, especially when we were getting started, we had a few customers, less than $500,000 in revenue. We did this constantly. Every customer that we signed with, we went back and asked them, why did you sign with Recruiter Flow? And that gave us the kind of insights in terms of how do they look at us. So, what kind of positioning, what kind of language we should be using, and not just that, but what change do they want to enable by implementing Recruiter Flow, right? Like, hey, I'm here in my journey, right? Like, as a founder, as an operator, and in 2 years, I want to be here, right? Like, whether that is 3x the revenue, 2x the margins, whatever those goals are, right? Like, and in order to do that, these are the things that I need. And one of that piece is my technology. And that's where Recruiter Flow comes in, when we kind of went deeper and deeper into these conversations with our customers, with the operators, right? Like, that's when um, a lot of great insights came to light, right? Like, and we still do that a lot. I still go back and talk to a lot of customers who've just onboarded with Recruiter Flow, right? Like, why Recruiter Flow in the first place, right? Like, and this is one of my favorite things to do. um, so just
Yeah, I I
if
love
you're
that.
confused, how do I get started on this about what Ben is saying? Just go talk to your customers. They will tell
There's
you.
some, yeah, absolutely, and there's something else in there as well, Manan, which is really interesting. You say that you went into the feedback, but you're also not only asking why did they choose you, but what goal were they trying to achieve? Now, I imagine, and you can tell me perhaps, that off the back of understanding what their goals were and what the trajectory they were on, you could also then think about other features that they perhaps hadn't considered before, that you could then build into the system that then would attract more clients or even retain them better, right? And this is
Absolutely.
that's the blueprint for recruiters as well. When you go and take feedback, you're not just saying, look, um, how tell me whether I did well or not, but like, why is it you chose us? What were you trying to achieve as an organization when you changed supplier? And then look, what more can we do? Let's have a brainstorm together about what more can we do. I think one of the things that recruiters worry about at times is that our solution isn't differentiated, that we are just recruiters, that we're just there to fill roles. So how can I use the language of transforming the way your clients hire into a competitive advantage. That feels, for some recruiters, quite out of reach. And yet, when they sit with a business and the business tells them, look, we want to launch a new product, but we can't look. Our milestones for that, the time frame that we're looking to do that across, has been slowed down because our project leaders, our project managers, spend 20% of their time interviewing people. So we're trying to get these products released more quickly, but we can't do it because our project managers' time is reduced, their capacity is reduced. So then we sit down and we go, right, okay, so let's have a conversation about it. Let's think about how can we, as a team, apply what we know to reducing the amount of time that your project managers or leaders spend on hiring. What could we do together? And sometimes your clients will suggest things. You say, well, I don't know whether you can do this, but could you help us with X? And you turn around and say, yeah, absolutely, we could. Sometimes the value of a consultant is not in having the answers. The value in a consultant is having the right questions to help your client find their own answers. I sometimes think recruiters overlook that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Right. And I think an easy way to remember that is, if you can be the reason that your hiring manager gets that next promotion, right? Mm-hmm. That's where you want to be. Right. So, no, that is fantastic. So we spoke about why we should do this in the first place, and how can I shift my mind shift, the way I think about this. But now let's dive into a little bit more detail, right? Like, what is are there any frameworks, any methodologies that I should follow to get started on this journey?
Yeah, 100%. I have two frameworks. They fit really nicely together. The first one is a framework called Open, and the second is a framework called Sign. Open is about how we start conversations, generate interest, engage clients, book meetings, and find out what problem they need us to solve. And Sign is, unsurprisingly, where we close the deal, we win the commitment, and we negotiate terms. Open consists of 4 elements. The O stands for objective. Objective is where we find out what they're trying to achieve as a business or an individual. You talk to the idea of a lead, when you can help a leader earn their next promotion. Well, I've talked about hiring as a competitive advantage for a business, but it also is a real superpower for individuals. There are some leaders you will speak to who, if you can say to them, look, I can coach you, I can show you, I can help you develop into the best manager at hiring in your industry, and that's a fantastically valuable thing. So what is their overriding objective? The P stands for the problems. What stands in their way? Why aren't they doing that already today? The E stands for effect. What effect is that problem? What effect is that gap having on them? Is it stifling their career progression? Is it reducing their revenue? Is it causing burnout in their team? What is the effect of this? And then the last letter of our Open framework is N for needle. And that means, how are you moving the needle? What are you measuring? What metric will you be using to show them that this has happened? And just to leave you on a little question here, another question that I really like, which is, if in 3 years' time your hiring is as good as it could possibly be, what will have changed and how will you know?
Right.
So that's a nice little question to point towards the needle.
That's fantastic. And right, like, I really love this approach of having very open-ended questions where you are doing a deep discovery with your hiring manager, with your client, getting them to volunteer a lot of information, and then essentially using all of that information, using and marrying that with your expertise, giving them an idea that, hey, you are here, and in 3 years, where do you want to be, and what can I do to help you get there, right? So that's fantastic. So what does the sign stand for?
Perfect. Yeah. So SIGN stands for solution. Now, I don't recommend the recruiters ever pitch. Instead, I recommend that they talk about their solution in the form of illustrations, which is our I of SIGN. Illustrations are examples of where you've done it before. So you say to your client, hey, look, I think we can help you with that problem. We've worked with another business where we applied a vacancy consultation framework. What that meant was that they invested more time in briefing us on the role in the first instance, but it reduced their overall time to hire by typically 2 weeks. Does that approach fit for you? Is there anything we might need to do to that approach to change it so that it fits better for you? And secondly, is there, if that doesn't work for you, why is that, and what might we need to consider? So that gives us our solution and our illustration. We then go to possibly the most important step in the framework, and I think, again, one that recruiters could drastically and dramatically change their close rates if they employed this step, which is group. The G in SIGN stands for group, and group means who are the buying committee, who cares about this, and who has enough say in this to put a stop to it. So I cannot tell you how many times as a recruiter I thought I'd got a good relationship with a client only for HR to find out and come along and shut me down, or agreed terms with the hiring manager only for finance to come along and shut me down. So I want to be thinking about, as I go through my process of selling to the client, who is the group, who is the stakeholder committee, and bringing them to the table, multi-threading to make sure that I've got the right people in the conversation. And then once I've done that, I can move to the final step, which is our N of SIGN, which is negotiation. At that point, and only at that point, can I start to think about terms of business, the way we'll collaborate, and the way they'll commit.
Perfect. No, that's very easy to remember. Now, you mentioned something very interesting, and I think probably a lot of people in the audience will have that question. I certainly do. Is when we talk about transforming the hiring process, and how do we make hiring a competitive advantage, right? Like when you start having that conversation, naturally the internal talent acquisition team at that company becomes your competitor, right? Like, because they are the ones dictating a lot of these processes. They are the ones kind of who own the hiring process, although the the hiring manager has the final say in terms of who gets hired, but it's the TA team that owns the hiring process, right? So how do you compete with their internal TA team?
Yeah, I don't actually. I don't. I recommend that we collaborate rather than compete. And the answer here is the internal talent team are working on this agenda to improve the way the business hires, right? So what can you as an external provider provide them with that will help them achieve that goal? You talked earlier about, how can I help you get your next promotion? I've got businesses that I'm involved with at the moment who will be talking to, who are actually having live conversations with the HR team saying, what data can we provide you with? What resources can we provide you with? What structures and frameworks can we provide you with that will help you in that kind of goal of creating change in organizations? Because honestly, HR and talent teams are also pushing against leadership and internal the internal leadership, trying to get them to evolve the way they hire. So actually, an external recruiter can be a real asset, and I saw this firsthand at EY. You mentioned a little bit about my background. My role at EY was primarily a project role to manage the PSL and to engage with the agencies we were working with. As a result, I received 20 or 30 cold calls from recruiters every single week for about 3 years. So I had quite a lot of exposure to business, the other end of business development. And the businesses that we chose to work with, the suppliers that I always promoted and supported, were the ones who, frankly, made my life easier, providing me with third-party information, providing me with benchmarks, telling me what was happening, at our major competitors, telling me more about what candidates wanted from us. That kind of information I didn't have access to, but recruiters do. So yeah, I think the value comes from reframing competition with HR and talent, and building it into a collaboration model and aligning ourselves with achieving the same goal as them, rather than conflicting in competition around who can fill the vacancy quickest.
Perfect. Okay. Now, so you mentioned that when you are, when you are doing the solution selling, right? Like you want to talk about, um, case studies, right? Like, hey, I was working with this other client, and this is what we help them do, right? Like, so let's go into a little bit of detail over there, right? Like, what kind of matrix, KPIs, outcomes, right? Like, should I show to kind of help my lead visualize that, okay, with working with Ben, I'm going to go from A to B in 1 year, and that is what I want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Makes good sense. I built the framework of everything that I share with my clients starts from the point of reverse engineering metrics. Okay, so when you take a solution selling approach, you step away from transactions and you think about client acquisition. You need to work out what is the client value. The way we do that is quite simple. We say, how many times per year will that organization hire through you? What percentage of those roles will you fill, and what is each role worth? So we've got the value of each role, your fill rate, and the hires per client per year. If I've got a client who hires 10 times per year, they pay average £10,000 per hire, and I fill 50%, I'm going to make £50,000 from that client in an annual period. So if my target revenue is £300,000 as a recruiter, if I'm trying to build 300k, if I'm trying to build £500,000, let's say, I need 10 of those organizations in order to hit that target. So we reverse engineer that metric, and we do this a lot with a lot of our clients. Typically, our market is that mid to senior level permanent hiring model. So we tend to work with businesses whose average fees are in that sort of 10k region. In the US, it might be more like on average $20,000, but in the UK and Europe, is typically £10,000 per client. And so usually what we expect, what we look at them, £100,000 per client is typical. We usually see that £90,000 per quarter, using the right methodology, is a really sensible benchmark for them to work towards, and the volume of activity that they need to do to generate that return is pretty achievable for most recruiters. So we kind of the name we use internally is 90k in 90 days, and what that does in turn is it doubles what the average UK based recruiter will bill. So it's a real framework for doubling profit per consultant or fees per consultant.
Perfect. No, that's fantastic. And so let's say I set on that path tomorrow, right? And what kind of investment of time and effort, and what kind of time frame should I be looking at as a founder, as an operator, for solution selling to start working for me and start seeing its results?
Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, and it's a really interesting one. It has a couple of different outcomes. The short-term impact is that your messaging immediately, when you go from being tactical to being strategic, when you stop talking about transactions and you start talking about changing the way your client hires, will book you more meetings, because it is a differentiated message that not many people are using. Okay, so you'll start booking meetings right away. Now, those meetings won't always result in immediate job vacancies. Even if you win a client with this approach, they won't always have immediate job vacancies, and that's where people get a little bit stuck on this. Sometimes businesses can get a little bit nervous, saying, "Well, look, we're following job flow. We're all about generating vacancies. My recommendation to a business leader with a perm business who's really looking to scale and ultimately produce some kind of predictable revenue is to worry less about vacancies and see vacancies as a byproduct of good business development. If you can get clients to sign with you who say, look, we love the way you approach things, we value your consulting, we value your advice, we value your partnership, and we'll let you do our hiring when those roles come up. And by the way, we hire 5 to 10 times per year. Worry less about whether they've got live vacancies and worry more about the annual value of that client. And when you do that, the medium to longer term results really start coming through. I want every consultant that I work with to get to a place where they're building £360,000 worth of pipeline a year, so 90k every 90 days. And so at the end of their first year, they've built a pipeline, and by the end of their second year, in that second year, they've built as much of that 360k as they possibly can. But it's also then exponential. There's absolutely no reason following that framework why a recruiter who has built £300,000 in their second year shouldn't bill close to 1.5 million in their fifth year. Yeah, that's what we see. I'll tell you some. I think you're going to ask me some stories about case studies and some of the people we're working with. So I'll share some more of that later. But yeah, that's the metric and the direction we want to go in.
No, let's do that, right? Like, I think this is a time as good as any, right? Like, so give us a couple of stories of people who went from transactional selling to solution selling. What were the ups and downs? What did that journey look like? And what is they were here and now they are here, right? Like, what did that look like?
Yeah. This person, I think, exists in most recruitment businesses. A good biller without much of a sales methodology, if you could call it that, even really much of a plan, but a good biller, a significant biller. And Adam was that guy. When he reached out to me, he'd billed £250,000 in his last year, pushing on for 300k in the year that we spoke, and he'd been promoted to business development manager. And he was nervous because he didn't feel that he had a rock solid process. He didn't feel he could manage because he didn't really, he was billing well, but everything he knew was internalized, and he didn't really have a blueprint or a roadmap to follow. And he said he wanted a coach. He came to me and said, "Hey, Ben, I need a coach." I said, "Cool. I will coach you on your process." "What's your process?" He said, "I don't have a process." I was like, "Right, well, before we could do any coaching then, before we even think about performance improvement, we need to know what's working and what isn't working. We won't know what's working and isn't working until we've externalized your workflow and your process. So we need to get into the nitty gritty of what you're doing, why and when and how." So I did that with him, and I helped him by bolting into that lots of the stuff that we've talked about, but also other things around how to make cold calls, how to write good emails, how to use social media and DMs effectively, how to run sales meetings specifically using discovery frameworks, how to get his messaging right, yes, but also how to build pricing around his solutions and close effectively. And where we got Adam to was a place where he was really confident with his process, and that helped him bill more. In the first 6 months after that, he went on to bill 400k. He's just closed his last year. He's become $1 million biller, the first $1 million biller that has been in his business. But I think the thing that makes it all the more impressive, and I need to tell you a little bit more about Adam to put some context to this, but the thing that makes it all the more impressive is that he's become $1 million biller as a billing manager with a team of 5, whilst breaking a new market in the US. Now, Adam is relentless. The day that I met him was a Monday. The first day I first met him was a Monday. He had spent the entire weekend, 20 hours over the weekend, mapping his market. So he is already an outlier, right? But he has taken the framework that we've built for him. It's accelerated his billings, and it's also got his team. As I mentioned, he's got a team of 5 who are each billing £300,000 each. So his team of 6, including him, is doing 2.2 million using the framework that we built. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to share those kinds of stories, and it's a massive credit to Adam. But it also goes to show that you can be a high producing billing manager, providing you have the right framework and structure behind you.
Thank you so much for your time, Ben. You've been gracious with your time. We will, so Sagrika has put Ben's LinkedIn in the chat. So connect with Ben, and we'll have this recording sent to you in next couple of weeks. And we'll have all the details about Ben, his LinkedIn, his website, all of that, along with that recording. Thank you again, Ben. Thank you for attending, and see you next time.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it.